Let me know. Yes, somebody wanted to know if the session will be recorded. Okay. Yeah, I think there's a chat. Okay, so Janvi is going to answer the chat, so I don't have to look at it. So let me know whenever you want me to start. I think we have a few people here.
Yes. Well, since I'm here, maybe I'll just welcome you, Neela, and thank you to be our TRW facilitator, 3rd year in a row. And last year you were literally all over Truth and Reconciliation. I think you were involved in maybe 4 or 5, maybe even 6 events.
Not that many.
It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. And anything you do is so core to this work of Truth and Reconciliation. So I just want to thank you and to welcome you and say how much we appreciate having you as one of our Truth and Reconciliation facilitators.
Oh,
so
thank you.
Over to you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Neelima. I really appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate the work you do. And it gives me a chance to share things that I, love to do anyway. So this Masks of Men, I did not get to give the full title before. As you know, I've had a crazy time. So I'm calling it A Vision of Enlightened Masculinity. So since this is such a small group, I will talk 45, 50 minutes, share the slides, and then have a dialogue, whatever questions and answers. And I would like to learn, and if you have any specific things or add. So as you know, those of you who have seen my presentation, I pick the pictures with a particular thing in mind. Each picture has a meaning. So when I talk about a vision of enlightened masculinity, it is always in, deep union with the feminine and the other way around. So as you can see, the NASA picture is there too. So this cosmic awareness is behind this presentation. So let me move my, okay. So, all right, the first, this is Guru Purnima, very, very important day for all of us. And I bow to all my gurus, and especially, you can see in the very right is Siddhama, my family's, guru who gave me a taste in the beginning. In the middle is my Gnostic guru, Rosamond, whom I lost last December. And here is my Vajra guru, Pulavadhuta Satpurananda, who's given me everything as far as knowledge and understanding of Tantra and things like that. So I bow to all of them. And the understanding of the Guru principle is very important because it is, of course, within us. And one image on the top right, which is the void, which I called pregnant nothingness, the womb of the mother, from where the masculine and the feminine, the light and the dark, both arise. So in this image, there is this, there are of course many ideas of the Adi Guru, but this is Dattatreya, 3 heads of the masculine. So you can see that, but it is when the Guru is one with the void, and Guru is both a dance of light and dark. It's very, very important from the tantric perspective to recognize that it is this dance that we need to recognize within ourselves. So let me see. Sometimes the machine kind of does not want to move. Okay. So, well, so this presentation is a kind of a small segment of a planned course. In my college, it's called WGS 120. That's the number, Masks of Men, Religion, Myth, Art, and Ritual. But I'm not giving you, first I thought I'll give an overview of the course, but I decided to focus on this idea of the enlightened masculinity, because the course is a part of. So that's why it is called, the masks of men, because everything that we see actually comes through a mask, right? So in this image, you can see this ancient Greek theater that you're always speaking through a mask. Because the reality, we cannot speak of, right? Whichever way it is. So I'm not talking about the entire course. I'm just talking about this small segment. But I wanted to begin by this, a recent journey that I took, that some of you know, journey into south of France. This was my Mary Magdalene journey, Spain, and we ended up in 5 different countries. But the entire experience, and the first 2 images are from this gorgeous, the Galamouse in this area in south of France. So there is this profound sense that I had, the Magdalene energy meeting Christ consciousness, which is not different actually, it's already there, except that we have separated that, the Magdalene energy. But the journey was just so crazy, amazing. And then the image that you see on the right was a very fascinating synchronicity where the Star of David was reflected in one of the Black Madonnas in this church in the south of France. So this unity is this unity that is vital. And for that, those of us who have been doing all the feminine, divine, and it's vital that we acknowledge, the enlightening masculine energy. So the journey also was, in a strange way, it was bringing me up in the mountains and bringing me into the depth of, caves. It was like going up, coming down, and strangely, when we went inside the Lascaux cave, you can see, those of you who are familiar with it, you may know that the Lascaux cave has this ithyphalic image of the shaman. And then we ended up in this another deep, deep cave where the subterranean river was moving. So this understanding, and then we ended up on top of the mountains, and the constant movement of this up and down between the masculine and the feminine, whatever we call it. So this journey itself kind of almost revealed to me the power of this amazing journey of the dance, and the magnificent diversity of life, magnificent glory of life. That is, I mean, again, every time I try to communicate it, it's so hard, so hard. But entering the depth of the cave, who is going into the depth of the cave, right? It is the penetrating masculine that is going into the depth of the cave. So, and of course, it's kind of different cultures have different ways of, expressing this. So this going up and coming down, right? So the ithyphalic shaman, and there is this dying and resurrecting gods in all of us. This particular image is, of course, people have tried to figure it out in many different ways. What does that represent, But it is one of our earliest expression of the masculine energy that is also lying, right? Like this, like Shiva, the possibility of this absolute quiescent aspect of us, which is represented in this Lascaux image. I know, of course, you have this little bird and many interpretations given to us. But the part in us that lies completely quiet, Shiva, right, waits for the feminine to put step and then is able to dance. So it was very, very moving for me to, of course, we went to Lascaux, we went to Altamira, then we ended up in this Neo cave, which was just mind-boggling. The only one that you can still go inside. These others are replicas because, to protect them. But to go inside these caves where these prehistoric human beings they were not different at all from us. Now we know that, the idea of some primitive people is, erroneous. Who went into the deepest part of these very dangerous caves and then painted this amazing stuff. And of course, some of you may know, exquisitely carved like horses, bisons, and of course there in Altamira, you can see the hand, hand of the painter saying, I have been here. So this particular aspect of us that goes into the depth of, reality is the masculine principle in many ways. And so it is this, and I'm calling it enlightening masculine energy, the expansive self that, is this goes that expands, right? And then of course it contracts. So it's the expansion and then contraction. Contraction is the feminine, we call it Vimarsha and Prakasha in the Indian tradition. So all of these, I mean, of course, there's so many, whether it is the Nataraja dancing, Jesus teaching, the Buddhas, and of course the Nabi of Islam and the Prophet Muhammad, all of them are there in this aspect of this enlightening masculine energy, who have recognized the feminine in them, within them. That's why they're able to speak, with the authority, in the sense, the ability to be authentic, to say, to speak of reality. So then I thought, when I'm approaching this particular subject, how do we approach it? Because in some ways it is a bit, it's a tricky subject. And I kind of picked up this book by one of my, very, very favorite masters, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, some of you may know about. So he has this book, and I'll talk about it in a minute. So this particular subject, which is about work, sex, and money. So should we approach the subject from the point of view of all is good, or take another approach where there is energy happening? So please understand what I'm trying to say here. It is very important to understand this thing that is called masculine, to come from a place of dynamic energy, right? It is not that everything is good, that everything is peaceful, because that's not how reality is. There is dynamism. What he's saying, there is something to work on, and things are dynamic and provocative. All right. We know from our, I don't know if there are any men here who the, I don't know who the, audience is, except I only see the three of you here. But this, we're provoked, right? Often. So we need to stay with that. Remember, this is a tantric master, and that's the tradition that I'm coming from. So recognizing, so there are flashes of negative energy, flashes of positive energy, flashes of destruction, flashes of hatred and love. All of this is happening within the big perspective of a mandala, a sense of totality or wholeness, a pattern and a structure that unify and contain all the parts. All right. So we need to approach this subject of divine masculinity or masks of men, or this enlightened masculinity within that mandala pattern, understanding that it has this dynamism in it. So the reason I picked up his book, it is called Work, Sex, Money. Even though it's a marvelous, amazing book, about the real life on the Buddhist path. But the reason I picked this, because how men are defined in modern culture, right? We've mostly seen the shadow side and immature masculinity. In some ways, because it has been severed from the feminine, right? But why this work, sex, and money? So men are defined by that. We, even when we talk about, some horrible violence and all that, associating, I actually really seriously dislike the word toxic masculinity, because you cannot have toxic masculinity without toxic femininity. All right. So, but this is how we have reduced, right? Modern culture has done that. We've forgotten the enlightened masculine. We are defining through this, well, and see what happens, whether you are creating economic hitmen, right? Excessive work in this capitalistic system, or this hypersexualized male, who rapes the female, and, violence against women, everything. And it's all defined by this, hungry ghost self, right? So this is an immature, and then of course, the severance of the feminine is such a complex subject. So that's why I wanted to bring in Chogyam Rinpoche's, this thing that there is a dynamism, there is a negative and positive. We need to absorb both of them. We need to be able to accept, like you were just saying, Nilima, in your other presentation, that what is this shadow? But I think I have said that before, even the shadow is also a chaya, right? Shadow is, in India, the word is chaya, which is shade. The root is the same thing. We sit under the shade of a tree, right? So even the shadow masculine, once we see it, once we see it, then it can be a shade. And then probably we can somehow, kind of negate the violent aspect. And somewhere from that energy itself, the transmutation will happen from that energy itself. You cannot, it's not like, it's some other energy. It is the same energy that transmutes into the enlightened aspect. So now I wanted to just, since the understanding of the masculine is always in relation, and every culture comes up with different ways. You are all familiar with the yin yang aspect. And again, they're all within us, whether you're man or woman. But at the same time, there are some, the reason they're called masculine and the feminine. So, yin is this darkness, moon, feminine, shade, rest. Yang, light, sun, masculine, brightness, activity. This is how, and the sunset and the sunrise. And then, of course, all these different qualities. I'll just read the masculine one because it's this externalization, right? And, it's doing rather than being, this quickness rather than the slow, deliberate aspect, right? This active aspect. It is focused, externally focused, the ambitious, determined. These are all the ways that the different yang aspects kind of are imagined. I'm not going to read the whole thing. So, but then let's see how another tradition looks at this thing. So here in the Buddhist path, feminine is wisdom and masculine is compassion. And what is this compassion? It is the skillful means, right? It is the skillful means. Okay, hold on, it's moved too fast. I go back to it. So, so let's think about the skillful means. If we have wisdom, right? Or that's the quiescent wisdom aspect, but we do not know how to express it. So the skillful means comes from the compassion of the Buddha, all right? Recognizing the feminine, but then it is through skillful means that we make the compassion real in the world. We have to know. And that is seen as the masculine in the Buddhist tradition, right? Because we usually think that, compassion is feminine, but here, compassion is masculine because it applies the skillful means of the teaching. The Buddha wouldn't teach, before, if he thought that, okay, how am I going to express this, what I have experienced? And in this tradition, the experience is feminine, right? And the analysis, the analytical aspects are masculine. And you have to put them together to be able to present something, to be able to teach, to be able to heal, right? So this is how, so again, the reason I'm saying that which one is masculine, which one is feminine, it's like it's a fluid thing, but still there is some core where our experiences of the masculine and the feminine, of course, masculine, feminine, male, female, man, woman, these are all, they all have connotation, they all have these different meanings. So now, if you come to the Hindu tradition, now look at this, the Shiva Shakti, Purusha Prakriti, consciousness and cosmic energy. So now we are looking at it from another angle, right? So here in this, specifically the Sankhya Yoga Tantra tradition that I am, kind of fond of and I explore, reality is a she, its seeker is a he, all right? And they dance together. You can't have one without the other. Now, of course, it is all coming from the void that cannot be named, which is, I call the mother principle, the womb of everything. But in the Sankhya tradition, the Purushas are many, while Prakriti is one, all right? This entire expression of the universe is this great play of the feminine. And the one who wants to know her, wants to figure out what is going on, is this masculine aspect in us. It is Purusha. And it's different from Nara and Nari, to use the Indian words. Nara and Nari are ordinary, like men and women. But these are attributes. These are the way we understand, all right, the totality and the seeking aspect. So the seeking aspect in us is the Purusha aspect, is the one that wants to know. Okay. Now, unfortunately, of course, and this is the reductive aspect of Western traditions, which has created this hierarchically organized dualism, which I talk about in pretty much everything. So this is a vertically organized dualism that characterizes Western metaphysics. So here what happens, instead of the male and the female, the yin and yang together, or Shiva Shakti together, here the male spirit, mind, light, soul, white, father, good is up there, and at the bottom is female, flesh, matter, darkness, body, black, hell, whatever, So everything negative, everything that we want to suppress, control, that's at the bottom. But that's the hallmark of spiritual patriarchy also, right? So if you make Purusha superior and Prakriti inferior, the same problem will happen. But here we know that the scientific model too, right? Mind above, matter below. So that's why the entire earth has become this, trash, instead of this luminous materiality. So the reason I wanted to put all these, because different ways of understanding. So male spirit, mind, is it the masculine aspect, and not necessarily the male aspect, right? So very important that at this point in our history, we kind of, these models, we have to see these models as just partial developments, as something that collectively we have developed, collectively we have created for whatever reasons. But I have an idea that it's because of this expansive aspect, right? The masculine has taken over because this expansive aspect, it's just going outside. It's this continuous expansion that has brought us. And the part that is tricky here is that somewhere this thing became extremely self-conscious, the extreme self-conscious aspect of our being. So I like to always quote this incredible scientist who studies the brain, is his book, The Master and His Emissary. And he talks about this history of modernity and the Western tradition. There has been a relentless growth of self-consciousness leading to increasing difficulty in cooperation. But we need to see it, why that has happened, right? So what has happened as a result, an increasingly mechanistic, fragmented, decontextualized world marked by unwarranted optimism mixed with paranoia and a feeling of emptiness has come about, reflecting, I believe, the unopposed action of a dysfunctional left hemisphere. Now, usually we think the left hemisphere is the masculine aspect, right? So this excessive, over expansion of this one aspect of our being, of course, there is much more to it than the brain. All right. But if what he's described, all these scientists are also recognizing and talking about that the inner structure of our intellect reflects the structure of the universe. And that has been a yogic recognition for a very long time. Yogic recognition has always talked about this. And he says the kind of attention we pay actually alters the world. We are literally partners in creation. This is coming from a scientist who studies the brain, all right? So paying attention, we need to, we are comfortable, women who have actualized at least certain aspects of the Divine Mother's blessing. So to be able to look at the masculine without the prejudices, without the hurt, it's vital, right? So this is what I'm trying to do here. I think I'm trying to pay attention to this marvelous, gorgeous masculinity. I have two sons, my father, who, Kali lover father, the father of my sons, and my brothers, my friends. How do we pay attention without reaction? How do we recognize that this thing that we have created collectively. Individual men and women in different thing, but we need to recognize that this mechanistic fragmented thing that we have created together, by over expanding this aspect, right? The limited left hemisphere. But this is a book worth reading, by the way. So that's why I always kind of refer to this this man's work. All right. So now let us look at the way we have understood different ways that this enlightening masculinity has opened itself to the world. So there is this fantastic book, which is called Myths of the Male Divine, by David Leeming and Jake Page. They also wrote an earlier book, was Myths of the Female Divine. So it's very fascinating that in the preface, they say when they were thinking of writing this book, as a sequel to the Divine Feminine, they had this curious, uncanny experience of the raven and the coyote showing up in the place where they were, planning to sit down and write this book together. So in the world of the shamans, all right, this male god is a trickster god, all right, a trickster god. So it's very important to recognize that aspect, that there is this sense of something trickster. Why the trickster? Why the shamans talk about all these trickster gods? Because we cannot contain them. We say that the feminine cannot be contained, right? But it's the same thing. The masculine cannot be contained either within any kind of borders, even though the masculine does create borders, it creates that, so-called order. But these trickster gods, right, whether the raven and the coyote, they represent in the ancient shamanic world, they have this quality. And they write so beautifully about these, the shamanic world, where the natural world and its powerfully quixotic element, which is played by the shaman. And because during our journey, we were listening to this book called Shaman, Kim Stanley Robinson, amazing writer, and kind of captures this young shaman who's actually going into the cave and painting, because it's about the shaman's journey into the cave and creating these paintings. So these are some of the earliest expressions of this aspect of the masculine, right? The shaman is different from a priest. Shaman is this recognizes this energy arising and this connection. Okay. And there is something, and I'm thinking of the shamanic Americas, there is this mystic male. Maybe there is a longing in all of us, right? Women, or again, it's not just a heterosexual aspect, but this, whatever that other is, right, that attracts us, whatever that other is, that wants us to explore ourselves into going deeper and deeper and deeper. There is this mystic male, right? This beautiful mystic male. And these are some of the images from the shamanic Americas, the native people, and the wisdom that they contain, through images. On the very right, it's this, this flute playing kachina. It's just an amazing how these are this amazing creation of this shamanic world. Now, so the divine masculine, or this enlightening energy, is also, it's an active force, the thirst for transcendence, right? Now, since we have so devalued immanence and feminine, but what happens sometimes without that thirst for transcendence, we could get stuck, right? It can be a sticky existence. So we need to recognize that the yogi, the male aspect, that thirst for transcendence, that means going beyond. You have to go beyond, and then you have to return, right? This is an up and down journey, or kind of centripetal and centrifugal journey, right? You have to go inside and you have to. So this aspect, this is how I am seeing it, that it is this active force and thirsting for transcendence, whether individual men are doing it or not, but they have been doing it all over the world, right? So we recognize that, great yogi. Now, as far as understanding of masculinity as archetypes, Here, of course, my favorite, psychologist, Carl Jung, who speaks of the wise old man. One of the archetypes is wise old man. This is Philemon, and he speaks about his experiences in the Red Book, right? So recognize what is this. So we talk about the maiden mother crone, right? So here in the masculine archetype, we recognize this the old man. He's this wise old man who shows up in all these different guys, right? So, and he calls this particular one Philemon. But look at the wings, right? It kind of reminds me of the Isis opening her wings. But here in the middle is this divine masculine, the archetype of the wise old man. Now, then, of course, we have the divine child. Now, the divine child as a masculine archetype, and sometimes people wonder why you see, always the mother with the male child, because that's the polarity, all right? That's the awakened being. That's, again, in the tantric tradition, there are this beginning stages and then there are completion stages. So once the void, you are inside the void, which cannot be expressed. And then the being that comes out is the divine child. So you can see whether it is the baby Krishna, baby Jesus, you see here baby Shiva, which you do not see usually, because this is Tara suckling Shiva once he has taken on the entire world's poison. In the Indian story, when the churning of the ocean happens, both, extreme poison, Kalakuta, arises along with the nectar of immortality, right? They both arise at the same time. And Shiva principle, that's what, Shiva principle takes on the world's poison, right? Takes on that poison. Nobody wants it, right? But it will arise. So he takes it, and then that's why he's the, Neela Kanta, his neck is blue with poison and he's writhing in pain. Then Tara is suckling him. All right. So this is the image from Tara Pit. You do not see it usually, but that's the image. That's where this understanding of the divine child who is emerging from the womb of the great mother as this awakened being. So this is why you see, Jesus, of course, Krishna, of course, and many, many aspects of the divine child. So there is this divine child in us that awakens, right? But that awakening in the tantric tradition recognizes that the poison also has to be taken in. It is not some pristine kaivalya or sitting in a cave feeling, quite content away with this detached observer aspect, right? Which is also masculine, which is called, the Sakshi Chaitanya, or the one that observes. But in the tantric tradition, actually, they do not sit at the, in the kaivalya situation, because then they become what is known as avatars of the, because they're returning, they're descending into the world and accepting both aspects, right? Both the nectar of immortality and the poison, and that great being is able to take it and then teach from that experience. So this is the divine child archetype. And of course, many different manifestations are there. Then we have the gods, right? The male gods. The trouble, of course, has, masks of God, of course, Campbell's word. These are masks, different ways. The ruling gods of patriarchy are also part of that. And there are innumerable of them, innumerable versions of it, even when we are looking at so-called monotheism, one God. But the expressions are many, right? The expressions are many. And they're marvelous. Actually, when we have developed enough peace within ourselves, which means the quieting down of our own energies, we're able to look at these, magnificent gods, whether the Vedic, the Indras, all, the later gods of so many male gods. They're marvelous, they're fascinating, and they're also expressing different energies, right? And even within monotheism, whether Christianity, Judaism, Islam, they all have this, quixotic. But once we fossilize them, of course, then we lose the archetype, we lose the power. And that is what has happened. That is what has created this kind of destructive aspect that we call patriarchy, which is a system that we both, that in the sense of men and women, participate in it. And that's what we are trying to reveal through our understanding of this enlightening masculine energy. Now, of course, I have to speak of all the male poets, storytellers, scientists, philosophers, musicians, painters, dancers, leaders all over the world that I have loved, who have taught me so much. On the left is actually a self-portrait of Rabindranath Tagore, and you see the Dalai Lama, and in the middle, actually, this Ralph Waldo Emerson saying, becoming a transparent eyeball. It is this seeing eye, right? The one that sees, that's the ability to see. And this is a painting by Alex Gray on the right. Extraordinary expression of the light and its expression, right? I don't know if you're familiar with Alex Gray's work, but this aspect, right? This aspect of profound creativity, which comes from that witness consciousness, Sakshi Chaitanya in us, the ability to observe. And believe me, the one that I know the closest who observes everything is my mother, 97-year-old mother. When she tells me about her life from childhood onward, I realize she was born with the witness consciousness, the ability to observe, right? Yes, that creates this detached, and we need to have that detachment in the beginning, right? And that's how we create. Otherwise, we cannot create. If we are in the middle of this, the whirling world of Prakriti, we need to create that. But this is an amazing expression, whether I love all the writers, Shakespeare, I mention them because people know, but as a lover of literature, teacher of literature, they're unbelievably amazing writers. I was teaching this book by Mohsin Hamid, actually teaching both Reluctant Fundamentalists and Exit West in our local library. And I was just absolutely wowed by this man's capacity to express in words, right? So I bow to them, right? I bow because I've learned so much. I learned so much from these different ways that men have created, the world of art, the world of, the joyful world, and philosophers, thinkers. Okay. Now, this is the other archetype that troubles us is the warrior archetype, right? So the wars, the violence, the soldier, right? This is also, until recently, women said, oh, they also want to be on the front, but we do send our sons to kill, right? Collectively. So the warrior archetype, we have to acknowledge that there is this energy, right? But how do we revision it? Can we revision the same energy so that we can reduce the wars of the world? And that's the effort, but it is still part of that mask. It is still part of that mask of masculinity. But there has to be this, kind of a expression of this energy, the warrior. But the warrior also fights against terrible things. The warrior also protects. Unfortunately, an unconscious aspect, of course, turns on, the closest to them. But this is the effort. By looking at these archetypes, we revision them, right? So here, of course, the warrior pose making, and in the middle is the Om. How do we integrate that energy? Or the Kung Fu master, incredible power, incredible energy, masculine energy. But it is, it is transmuted. It is this transmuted energy. Then, of course, we see these marvelous masters in the Islamic tradition, in search of a nur. Hold on, let me see if I got this right. Yep. So in the Islamic tradition, these great masters, they are in search of what they call nur mohar. It's the same thing. It's called Mahamudra in the Tantric tradition, the seal of light. All right, the seal of light. There are also so many of these are men, right? And this recognition that the Nabi is the word, Nabi, it's actually a Hebrew word for the prophet, and all the sheikhs of Islam who are they're seeking the same thing. They're seeking the same thing. And when they call it Nur Mohar, that means the seal of light, it is connected with this expression of the masculine that has integrated the feminine within. And you can see that whether it is Rumi, Al-Hallaj, who comes out and says, An al-Haq, I am the truth, right? Of course, gets killed because, so there's a whole other dimension to it. the masculine taking on. And this is where I think the understanding of Jesus taking on all the sins of the world, or Shiva taking the poison in this thing, because there is this element, of abysmal dukkha in the world that these great masters take on in themselves. So Ibn al-Arabi, and then it is by taking on all this that this thing called love arises, right? Because our longing for love. So this line of Rumi, the love calls everywhere and always. We are skybound. Are you coming? This invitation is also from this enlightened masculine, to dance, and to accept this blessing, deepest blessing that we have been given on this, on this human form, on this planet. So now, I just wanted to go quickly. There's innumerable great masters of the subcontinent. There is Bama Kepa, and there is Ramakrishna, and this is Guru Rinpoche of the Tantric Buddhism, Tantric Shaivism, very complex aspects. But there are many contemporary masters I can talk about, during, if we have questions about it. But just quickly mentioning, then recently passed Thai. Something that he says, of course, there's so many things. Look at this master, walk as if you're kissing the earth with your feet. This profound love, right? And then he says, when another person makes you suffer, it is because he suffers deeply within himself. And this himself, I'm referring to himself, not himself or self here, because this is as far as I'm concerned, at least, a woman's gaze, right, at this enlightening masculinity, and his suffering is spilling over. So then this line, if you want your loved ones to be happy, you must learn to understand their sufferings and their aspirations. When you understand, you will know how to relieve their suffering and how to help them fulfill their aspiration. That is true love. If you only want your loved ones to follow your own ideas and you remain ignorant of their needs, it's not truly loving. It is only a desire to possess another, an attempt to fulfill your own needs, which cannot be fulfilled in that way. Now, see, we talk about, the male possessive aspect of the female, but the female possessive aspect of the male is there too, right? In understanding, in recognizing the suffering of the other, suffering of the one that is hurting you sometimes. Of course, you require an enlightening feminine to be able to see that also. So, we have talked a lot. I know Neelima always speaks of the hero's journey and the heroine's journey. And in my classes, since I teach these things, I realize that the boys need to be helped, all right? Because remember, the model that is put is that work, sex, money, and in its most destructive aspect, right? So how do we facilitate our brother's sacred journey? And this is a line that comes from, Campbell, because he, of course, made this whole hero's journey popular. People know about it. The privilege of a lifetime is being who you are. The goal of the hero, the jewel point, and this self, right? The Buddha consciousness. How does that arise? How do we facilitate that in our brothers, in our sons, our partners, our, whoever it is that comes? And again, I'm talking about from the comfortable female, the mature female. Maybe I have to be a crone at this point to be able to comfortably talk about that, because it's not easy, right? We all know how difficult it has been. Of course, the rise of the feminine has given us the power to be able to speak, and it is time that we facilitate our brothers' sacred journeys. And that's where this love ideal, Tantra imagines. So this is the play of light and dark. In the beginning journey, the dark is female and the light is male. So Shakti and Shiva are presented. But in the return journey, Krishna is black and Radha is white, because these things have returned, but now they can dance together. The expressive aspect is feminine, but that's a very complicated story. But these lover gods, right? Krishna as this probably the most complicated because he kind of presents all aspects, whether it's the baby Krishna, the lover Krishna, or the one who's very tricky. The trickster god of India is also Krishna, right? We know in the Mahabharata he plays a very complicated role, but it is this lover aspect, right, that we long for. But we need to integrate and absorb that very messy energy aspect. That's why I began with the Chogyam Trungpa's thing, that we need to see this dynamic aspect, this energy that can express itself in negative ways, in positive ways, because that's the nature of the world. That's the nature of the world that we live in. So this dualism to duality, how do we dance together? We can only dance when we acknowledge each other, right? Acknowledge each other's profound presence in the world. So I would like to end, because it's truth and reconciliation, you know, the two amazing men, Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu, because they gave this, you know, ideal that it is possible to go beyond violence, right? Okay, let me just one a little bit more. Now, since just recently we had this Webb's Force deep field. Now look at the image, right? Look at this image. In the first beginning page also, I had this picture, and it reflects that foundational unity, right? You can see the seal of Solomon in that star. You can see the 6-pointed, right? Look at that image. In that grain of sand that this, you know, marvelous technology has given us. So what this tells me, or this particular news speaks to me, that the foundational unity is reflected in that grain of sand coming from so far away, and it is so close to us, right? So this yin yang, and this is the seal of Solomon, the dance of masculine and the feminine together. That's the reality that we live in. That is not that's not an ideal. That's not something that we need to aspire to, which is, this is what Mahamudra means, the great seal in us, right? That the cosmos, the seal of the cosmos, is imprinted in us. So here, the one that is looking at this amazing image. So at this point, so we have created the Anthropocene, we call it Capitalocene, the destructive aspect, which has brought us to the brink of disaster as far as the Earth is concerned, right? We can end it if we synchronize our energies and awaken, which is already there, already imprinted. It is only through this uncovering, only through these journeys. And I think this entire truth and reconciliation work is part of that journey. And it makes me really deeply, deeply grateful to be a part of that. But I thought, just before this, you know, the week started, and this incredible field, the image is so powerful, so beautiful, of our cosmos, and it is inside us and it is outside us. That's the Hermetic principle, Tantric principle. So that's pretty much the end of my talk. Thank you very much. And maybe we should let us end the battle of the sexes and dance together. And I always want to acknowledge the internet, this marvelous scientific, you know, discovery that gives me all these images. I can pick them up. It's easy for me to talk about things because, so I gratefully acknowledge, I don't know which one is copyright or anything. So this dance of Shiv Nataraja, which is, of course, some of you know, the Nataraja can only dance when the Shakti is all, you know, it is the Shakti inside him and he's able to dance together. So that's the hope. And that's with that, I end my talk. Thank you so much. So if you have any questions or add something, I'll be happy to learn from you and respond if possible.
I don't have a question, but something that I think about as I talk about, you know, masculine and feminine, and the kind of the rise of, at least in the States, and from what I'm learning in other places as well, the rise of, you know, the fluid gender identity. And just how does all of that, I mean, it's not really even a question. I think it's more just a contemplation about how that's all playing its part in this, right? And us finding the balance between the two within ourselves. And needing to kind of go to extremes of both in order to find actual balance. And it's really, I think, kind of fascinating to see what's happening with humans in general and just their own actual identity.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's playing out, right? In our effort to find that balance, in our effort. So I know in my, for example, I have brought my, I have a beautiful Nataraja image, which is actually half male and half female. I said, look, this is our transgender idea, right? Which is transcending gender. In the end, it is about transcending gender, right? But you are absolutely right. Because this is a spectrum, gender is a spectrum, right? It is fluid. In all of us, it is fluid. And it kind of, in the entire spectrum, there's this, and we know whenever there is extreme masculine and there is extreme feminine, there is a problem. So absolutely. So this struggle for, LGBTQ people and the struggle for, transgender identity, they're all external expressions of the same hunger for balance. How do we come, and how do we find that kind of a balance? But you're right. Yeah, that's how it is playing out in both of, and of course, whenever there is this external struggle, external expression, it creates anxiety, right? So think about it. Wherever there is this culture, actually in many ways hyper-masculine, homophobic, right? So it has created this fear, because whenever there is a touch of the feminine, there is this fear, because this feminine is this chaos, there is this whatever, the theologically messed up notion. But so yeah, I am enjoying this scenery, but of course it creates difficulties. I am not, there's plenty to talk about it, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, Marianne.
I enjoyed your talk very much, and I wondered if you could elaborate a little bit on the Shiv Lingam aspect.
Okay. Right. So it's funny that whenever we look at the lingam, we think about something phallic, right? So the ithyphallic image that we began, this is why I was showing you that Lascaux ithyphallic shaman's image. So the lingam always sits within the yoni, right? It's a yab-yam. It's just the Hindu version of the yab-yam, the sexually united male and the female together. But the lingam actually means a mark. It is not necessary, it's a sign, okay? And in its oval shape itself, it includes the male and the female, all right? You can see that in the oval shape. So this is the Indic understanding of this image of the masculine, and the word is urdhva retas, and let me explain what that is. I don't know, people who may understand that. Where the erect penis, which is of course symbolized like that in dance and this thing, which is a mark of this awakened sensibility, all right? So because of our discomfort with sexuality, but that's where all energy is. So the ability of the man to have this urdhva means, the energy going up, the capacity of absolute relaxed control over his sexual energy, all right? But the mythic stories in India, all right, mythic stories of this runaway, Shiva's penis that is running all over the place, and then it finds its home in the Devi's yoni, right? So there are mythical expressions of it, there are metaphysical understanding of it, but ultimately it is just that. It is that yab-yam, sexually united male and the female, in this profound awakening together. There is no separate awakening. You can't, female cannot, of course, because of the female in the Tantra, that we already have the masculine, in many ways, in a more, while the male has to work very hard to awaken the Shakti, that's the gynocentric understanding, but that's what the lingam represents, right? So Now, of course, all over the world, you see worshipping, the phallic worshipping. You can see actually phallic, right? We actually see which looks like the male penis and things like that. But the lingam represents that profoundly awake consciousness, which is always united with the Shakti and sitting at the base and emerging out of it. There are different ways of understanding it. And there is plenty to understand in the how it is, profoundly physical, and yet at the same time transcendental, because there is no dichotomy here. Samsara is nirvana. This is where so vital to recognize that the sexual energy itself is profoundly divine, right? And that's what the lingam represents.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I had an internet problem. It kept going on and off, but maybe we'll get a recording.
Sure.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Hi,
Vijay,
Vijay.
you have a question?
Yeah, just a question, a bit of an observation. Thank you very much. I enjoyed the talk very much. The things that stood out for me, one was, of course, being able to look at the shadow as chaya. I thought that was a really powerful insight for me personally. It connects with many things that I felt and believed, but you have given words to that, which I liked very much. I guess my observation has to do with the way our society today understands the word masks.
Yes.
And whenever I have heard the word today, whether it is the word masks or whether it is the word persona, we tend to use it with a tinge of negativity.
Right.
In other words, we are concerned about that which we are masking.
Yeah.
So we think of the mask as a kind of a cover-up. We think of a kind of a mask as a kind of a proxy.
Right.
Or we think of the mask as a kind of something that we are not.
Yes. Yes.
Whereas the original theatrical masks were not meant to cover up. They were meant to express a certain character or a certain emotion or a feeling or a certain role.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so when we think about the masks of men, we're not talking about the various ways in which the divine masculinity is covered up.
No.
We're talking about the various roles or the various acts or the various influences or the various spheres in which the divine expresses itself through that mask.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so I just wanted to, for my own understanding, and to check in with you, because I tend to feel that this word masks is misused and misunderstood in many ways. And I've been a mask collector all my life. And the reason why I've been a mask collector all my life is for this reason. Because when Campbell talks about the masks of God,
right,
he's not talking about the various ways in which we cover God or we proxy God. He's talking about the ways in which, the multiple ways in which the divine shines through.
Absolutely. You got that right.
I just wanted to mention that and ask if that was indeed your understanding as well.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Vijay, for your understanding, and you're absolutely right, and your presence here. So I appreciate that. So you got it right. Now, yes, this shade, and I'm glad that you noticed that. This was my feeling that without the chaya, right, it'll be too much sun, right? It'll be too much sun. And because in India where the sun is so if we just see the way we use words, that's what defines everything, right? the way we understand, as is a lover of literature, of words, this is why I play with it. I knew that the masks will create. So I call it coming from Masks of God, Campbell's this thing, and I called it Masks of Men. You're absolutely right, because these are the different ways that we are expressing ourselves. But at the same time, there is a hidden element, by the way, right? Because we can never completely communicate. We can never completely communicate what we are experiencing. It is a framing. It is a kind of, so this is why in the course, this thing is this Greek mask, right? With the eyes, blank eyes, right? This is just a hole. It's not even seeing it. So the profound mystery that we are swimming in, at the same time trying to comprehend, trying to express, is being expressed through a mask. All right, laughing mask. And this is why you see this, in the drama, the laughing mask and and the crying mask. And we are not just laughing and crying. There are so many different kinds of masks that we wear. Men too have to wear these things. We think that women have these roles. Men have been given roles, and sometimes extremely destructive roles. Women themselves create these roles, expectations from them. So sometimes they have to wear these masks, right? In order to pretend. Unfortunate thing is that most of the time it is not conscious, right? Because the conditioning creates these things. So the profoundly happy naked baby, a boy that runs around, right? Completely happy playing. And of course, then we start to put this, and then the boy is forced to put on a mask. The girl is forced to put on a mask. Yeah, but it's a good metaphor, and I'm glad that that you notice that, both the mask idea and the shadow as the shade. Thank you. Thank you, Poonam. Okay. Any other questions or elaborations anywhere? Yeah. Yes, sure. Bye.
Thank you so much, Neela. As always, such a delight, such a delight. And lots to soak in, and just the transmission was so healing, because it also depends on who is saying it. You have a very important message, but you're also saying it from a place that has reconciled this message inside yourself. And so it lands in a very different way. And
well, I'm not sure that I have completely reconciled. It's still a process. It takes a long time. Yes, but I have to admit, and I have said that in many of my other works and writing, and that I was very fortunate. I was very, very fortunate to have a father who, in spite of, I was never gendered that way. Neither me nor my sister, were two sisters. And as a Kali lover, he gave us this incredible sense of being. And that is why even my feminism, I could never understand that misandry aspect. Even though I recognize, of course, it's absolutely the things we experience. We know, how this unconscious masculinity can be so hurtful, right? But then in awakening, the conscious feminine, understanding these are after all the same thing. So without, and I guess this presentation or whatever I do is part of the process of understanding the masculine within me, and understanding and at least reduce the conflict. So when I say let's end the battle of the sexes, otherwise we are on a self-destructive path. So I appreciate your saying that it's coming from, it's true, but it is still a process. We are in it together, and hopefully, in our lifetime, we'll see more reconciliation, whatever the truth may be. And I appreciate your efforts in it, Neela.
Thank you, Neela. Maybe that's the perfect way to close as, just invoking the Guru principle to bring us to that reconciliation within,
Absolutely, absolutely. And the Guru principle today, I mean, last couple of times, it's, to be able to do this on Guru Purnima has been a profound privilege. And my own Guru, many, many Gurus, I bow to all of them, and everyone is a teacher after all, everyone is a Guru in our journey. But you have found this perfect spot to do this. So thank you very much. And thank you, Jana, Marianne, and Poonam, and Vijay, and Janvi to be there, to give me this chance to talk about my loved ones, actually. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Janvi.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
I'll see you in a bit, Neelima, in your talk.
Yes,
Okay.
look forward.
Yep.